Hi, welcome to UX Evenings at Google. I'm so glad that you could join us. My name is Julie Schiller. I am the UX and APAC Culture and Community Lead, and I also work a lot on monetization. I sit here in Singapore. I wanted to welcome you all to the very last UX Evening for 2020. We have had an amazing year together, and I just wanted to check out first and foremost who's joined us before live. So drop in the chat if you've come to 1, 2, 3, or if this is your first one, we're so glad you came. We have had a lot of connection through this session. We have about 10,000 viewers who watch these videos, and also about 2,000 people who dial in live, so feeling hopeful. If you are interested in this video or you watch it later or look at our past ones, you can check them out on Google Design's YouTube channel. But one thing I've never gotten to share with you guys before is why do this? So first and foremost, we're trying to build closer connections in the UX community in APAC. Also, we want to have an interactive discussion, which is why we chose this format. Our goal is to connect you with fresh insights from leaders in our field, but also we need to hear from you. I'd love if you could enter into the comments now why you join these events. Also, if you have any topic ideas for 2021, we're interested in hearing them because we're actually thinking through what we'll be doing in the next year. Please take a minute to do that. And when it's gotten in the chat, I want to spend a little time telling you about today's topic, which is UX and inclusion. We're going to hear from 3 amazing UX leaders, and they're going to talk about how to include more diverse users in our work and also how we do our work. First, I'm so excited to introduce to you our very own Margaret Lee. She is the Director of UX Community and Culture here at Google, a program that she founded in 2016, and it serves to empower the global internal community of UX. Before that, she led UX on Google Maps. It was very early days in its groundbreaking desktop experience, all the way through the transition to an indispensable tool for navigation and local exploration. Under her leadership, the Maps team went from a few designers into this global organization with multiple disciplines, and this work was actually awarded some pretty cool recognition by Fast Company Innovation and also Good Design Awards in Japan. So Margaret's been doing this for 20 years in the tech industry, and this is why she's the perfect person to talk with us tonight. She has continued to affirm what she's most passionate about, which is about creating the conditions where teams can flourish and individuals can uncover their unique leadership styles. So Margaret often speaks and writes about her personal journey and all of our collective responsibility to advance diversity and inclusion in the workplace. So today, she's joining us from California, where she's going to share some of her insights about being a UX leader. Listen closely for her 5 tips on how to make your own UX organization more inclusive. Which tip resonates more clearly with you? Also, enter your questions in the chat and we'll reply back during the talk. Plus, at the end, there is a Q&A where you're going to hear from all 3 speakers. Over to you, Margaret.
Hi, I'm Margaret Lee. I want to tell you about my rather reluctant journey into leadership and what it's taught me about inclusion. Who I am as a leader has been deeply influenced by my life experience and by my dad and his life experience. This is us in Boston, Massachusetts, where he immigrated to and where I grew up. My father was a paper son, an illegal immigrant. He was just 15 when he left the family village in China. Once in America, he lived in the shadows of the outside world. He laid low, he worked really hard, and he kept within the Chinese community that felt safe and familiar to him. He worked at his uncle's laundry, eventually earning enough to get an arranged marriage. As for the women in my family, they worked at the garment factory, sewing all day, then bringing home big bags of collars or cuffs to sew for an additional pennies per piece late into the night. So the chatter of visiting aunties and the hum of the sewing machine was the soundtrack of my childhood, which had a strong sense of insularity, an expectation to do my chores, get good grades, stay out of trouble, and not be conspicuous. My family situation was actually common within our community, but as a kid, I was keenly aware of the stereotype that we presented. My parents worked in a Chinese laundry and sweatshop. I was born of an arranged marriage. I brought strange food in my lunchbox every day. I mean, to the outside world, I did not exactly convey that I was a future leader in the making. After the laundry closed, my dad went on to work in one suburban Chinese restaurant after another. First in the back of the house, doing the grueling jobs of dishwasher and then cook. And eventually he moved to the better jobs in the front as a waiter and then a bartender. And getting these front of the house jobs was like getting a promotion, but it came with a trade-off because in the back of the house, he could be himself, talk to his coworkers in their shared language. He was comfortable in his skin. But once he passed through those kitchen doors to wait on customers in the front of the house, he had to assume a whole other persona. And this took a lot of energy and effort to not just learn and speak a second language, but to understand the social norms of his customers who were mostly white, suburban, and middle class. It was like learning a third language. And this was the metaphor as I went to school, graduated into the workforce, and proceeded down a leadership path. I carried that same duality of back and front of the house personas. I had been taught to go with the flow, don't make waves, be humble, and respect my elders at all costs. Leaders, on the other hand, especially in tech, are absolutely revered for thinking disruptively, being highly visible as the front man, and for rebelliously paving their own way. Early in my career, checking my life experiences at that door, it just felt easier than bringing my whole authentic self to work every day. I only realized this actually a couple of years ago when I attended this women's leadership retreat and I was taking part in a conversation about leading authentically. I found myself talking about this underlying duality that I felt for so many years between back and front of the house personas. And as it turned out, my story resonated with many other women at the retreat who then told me their feelings of mismatched backgrounds and expectations. And it really struck me, wow, I'm not alone. I mean, how many of us are making these kinds of trade-offs between our true selves and what we think we're supposed to be at work? And what can we do about it? Well, I believe that if we can just broaden our perspective on what leadership is, we'll naturally create more diverse and inclusive organizations. And in turn, that culture of inclusiveness will reflect in the products and experiences that we create. So let's look at 5 ways that we can broaden our perspective on inclusion and leadership. First, let's forget culture fit, because when we look for people who fit our culture, what we're really doing is reinforcing the boundaries of our existing comfort zone. You know, we're sticking with what's familiar. We might consider values alignment over culture fit. Companies like IDEO and Pandora think about a culture ad. And both these approaches acknowledge that, hey, a person can be in alignment with the company's values, but they can also add to the diversity of thought on a daily basis and at a team level. Not only will it definitely be more interesting to have more perspectives, but studies have shown that diversity is good for business and it's good for the products and experiences that we build. I want to tell you about accent hallucination, which is a phenomenon that happens when people imagine an accent when none actually exists, and then they assign some kind of meaning to it. In a 1992 study, participants listened to a recording of a lecture delivered by somebody who speaks, quote unquote, standard English. And while listening, they viewed either a photo of an Asian woman or a photo of a white woman. And those that saw the Asian woman ended up rating the lecture as less clear, less understandable, and they had measurably worse comprehension compared to the other group who saw the photo of the white woman, despite the fact that they heard the exact same recording. By the way, the study was repeated more recently using an Asian woman photo and a fixation cross, and the outcome was no better. The group found the Asian woman to be actually less credible than the fixation cross. But this is what unconscious bias does. It makes assumptions and it categorizes. Now, we all have some deep-seated cultural assumptions that don't actually fit reality. Are we willing to own up to that, even if it makes us uncomfortable? Because it will. But facing our discomfort is a necessary step towards realizing a future that could be more fair. Number 2, listen to learn. Listening's hard work, as we just saw, but you know what's harder? Not being heard. This book talks about different styles of listening. And as busy professionals, we tend to be very, very efficient in our communications, whether it's a one-on-one, a team meeting, or a presentation. We're either listening to win a point or we're listening to fix something. Now, in listening to win, our mind is essentially already made up, and we're just collecting evidence to, reinforce our point. My daughter Sophie happens to be really good at this. She's like a lawyer. And in the second style, called listening to fix, we're also gathering evidence, but this time we're trying to, narrow in on a solution for a problem. So you can imagine our day-to-day, we tend to stick to these two styles because, they help us efficiently move things forward. But when we're faced with situations or cultures that we have little prior exposure to, they don't work so well, because why would we fix or win over something that we don't yet understand, right? And this is where listening to learn comes in. Unlike listening to win and fix, which get us to narrow in on something, listening to learn is about expanding our understanding without any assumptions going in. So why is it so important for inclusion for us to listen to learn? Well, a lack of voice and not feeling heard is a really common struggle for people from underrepresented groups or introverts or are soft-spoken. And, I'm going to assume that this describes some people that we work with, I would hope. We don't want these people to get lost in the mix amongst the more talkative ones, right? We want to give voice to more perspectives and lived experiences, not just to those in the majority. Number 3, expand our frame of reference. This article is a very good example of a fixed frame of reference. My husband is British, so you could call him an expat. No one even blinks an eye. But never in 100 years did anyone ever call my dad an expat, because he was categorized as an immigrant, even after he gained citizenship, right? So how we talk about others and to others reveals our own double standards and categorical biases, because this categorization without any curiosity is basically reverse engineering some notion of culture fit and doesn't lead to any new perspectives. So can we ask ourselves, are we categorizing or are we being curious? Does our frame of reference assume a fixed perspective, or is it open to new possibilities? Number 4, immerse ourselves into both the problem and the solution. One of the challenges that I see with many corporate diversity and inclusion programs is that it's sometimes treated like an extracurricular activity rather than a mindset and a behavior that we're all accountable for. In 2011, Forbes surveyed 300 executives, and 65% of them said that they thought diversity and inclusion was the responsibility of their HR department, not themselves, but HR. Okay, I get it. Hiring is measurable. But you know what? Metrics just lull us into this false sense of progress. Ticking that demographic box does not create inclusion. I mean, what happens after somebody's onboarded? Are we going to respect the differences, or will we expect conformity? We can't outsource this one to HR. We all need to be accountable for addressing the problem of inclusion however we can. I'll give you one small example. Non-promotable tasks are projects not associated with the bottom line, right? They're generally about community good or service. And a study showed that women tend to volunteer more for these things, are asked to volunteer more, voluntold, and they accept more requests to volunteer than men do. If women are spending more time than men on non-promotable tasks, that might explain why there are fewer women advancing into leadership. So my team works across the company on many, many different community efforts, and we rely heavily on volunteer support. They take part in mentoring, peer-to-peer training, defining best practices, and it was really important to me that we fairly recognize the value that volunteers bring. So we changed the system to make it more fair. We took our career ladders, which define performance criteria, and we added a citizenship expectation. And this change lets us know that, hey, if work is worth doing, it's worth acknowledging and recognizing. It eliminates unfair burden on any one group like women, and it gets more people contributing to the betterment of our community. So, can we take a look at our policies, our product development practices with an eye towards fairness? Because once we're intentional, we will see things that can be improved, from a small thing like a team ritual to a big thing like a company policy. We can make meaningful change step by step. And finally, number 5, value non-jerks. We harbor this totally romantic notion of the tech god. You know, these are leaders with strong vision and a passion that makes us hang on to their every word. And because of that, we're willing to overlook some less good traits like being arrogant or temperamental or unreasonable because, you know, we tend to value vision and passion above all else. However, a study found that humble leaders actually create more collaborative environments. You know, they're self-aware and open to other people's ideas and feedback. Humble leaders focus on the how, while charismatic visionaries tend to focus on the what. The thing is, both of these are important, and there's room for both. Leadership qualities shouldn't be a zero-sum game. You know, we don't need to make trade-offs one for the other. We just need to make room for more types. Walt Disney, the great visionary himself, recognized that having the idea is just the beginning. It's the what. He understood the need to balance the visionary with the dreamer with a realist, someone to make it happen, or the how. And yet a third role, the critic, to kind of ensure excellence by asking the why or the why not. If you could dream it, you can do it, he said. And he valued different types of leaders to realize the dream. So quickly recapping, what can we do? We can forget culture fit and be willing to get uncomfortable with the unknown so that we can move beyond our assumptions. We could take the time to listen to learn, resist the urge to fill the silences or fix things before we really understand them. Expand our frame of reference and explore multiple perspectives. Immerse ourselves into both the problem and the solution of creating that inclusive culture, because what's the point of being diverse if we're not going to be inclusive? And of course, value non-jerks to discover just how rich and multifaceted that leadership can be. They're not hard, but it's going to take intention. And I believe the payoff will be great, with a more diverse and inclusive culture reflected at all levels of the organization and in our work. So before I go, I just want to leave you with one more story. I've talked to you today about my past and the influence that my dad has had, and I want to just take a moment to peek into the future to tell you about my daughter. When Sophie was 4, her preschool teacher called me into her office, and Miss Judy started the conversation with, "In my 25 years of teaching, I've never lost control of the class as when Sophie starts clowning around." Okay, so this went on for a bit when her feedback actually took a sudden turn. "The good news," she said, "is that these are signs of a natural born leader. If we can just direct her tendencies, she'll do just fine." Wow. I mean, Sophie's now 16, and the story has just stuck with me since, not only as her mother looking out, to get the best out of her, but also as someone who just never has identified with being a natural born leader, right? What exactly were those qualities that she saw in 4-year-old Sophie? Well, clearly fearless in the face of authority, right? She's a class clown, AKA she has a commanding presence. She has a disruptive mindset. She likes to question all the rules before taking part. She has a strong point of view about everything, which she uses to relentlessly debate me. Remember, she doesn't like, she's a listen to win type, she doesn't like hearing no for an answer. So while these might not be great traits in the preschool classroom, they really are the same traits that we seem to value in our current model of leadership. But I know that while Sophie might have a head start by nature, she's going to need to balance these traits with other qualities to become a well-rounded leader and a balanced human being. And she's doing great, by the way. I mean, all of us have both natural abilities and latent skills that need to be nurtured and developed in concert with one another. And if we can pave the way for more people from all types of backgrounds to realize their potential, we might see more hope and less reluctance. So my late dad might be surprised to see me talking to you from the front of the house today, but I know it's not just about me or his influence anymore because I have Sophie to nurture towards her full potential. So whether you're reluctant like me or natural like Sophie, remember, we all have the potential for authentic and inclusive leadership. Let's value that in ourselves and open up the possibilities for others. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you for that moving talk, Margaret, and also sharing your own experiences. I did want to remind all of you to share your questions in the chat, and also I'd love to hear some of your own experiences bringing inclusion and diversity to your organizations. Are you a reluctant leader or a natural one? Also, take a minute and think, what's one thing you or others like you could commit to in 2021 to ensure authentic and inclusive leadership in your workplace? While you take a minute to think about that, I'm going to introduce you to our next speaker from a little closer to home. We are lucky to be joined by Eyung Lim and Joy Eng from GovTech. Eyung is leading the cross-functional team of product delivery managers, designers, and engineers at GDS, which he'll tell us about in a minute. His team is supporting government agencies in developing products and solutions that are impacting many people here in Singapore's life using agile and user-centric design. The team works on a lot of strategic national projects like Life SG, or Moments of Life, you might be familiar with, Singapore government tech stack products such as whole of government applications analytics, COVID projects such as everyone's favorite Trace Together and Go Where series. His team has a special interest in calling in social sector projects to support vulnerable groups, which is why I think it's going to be a pretty interesting talk today. He's lucky to be joining conversation with Joy. Joy is a UX designer on the GovTech Assisted Living Ecosystem team. Before GovTech, she worked in some fintech companies, and before that, she was an academic designing some crowdsourcing platforms for exploring spaces, thinking about smart trackers for empowering people with dementia, and also understanding digital possessions. She has a great background to share with us from her publications and presentations at conferences such as CHI, and also her Master's in Communication and New Media from NUS. This exciting talk will tell you all about how to be inclusive in your product work during a pandemic. How do you ensure that everyone is included for important things like government mask distribution? Be sure to share your questions during this talk in the chat, and we'll answer them at the end of the talk in the last part, which is a Q&A. Thank you so much, and over to you guys.
Hello, everyone. It's a very honor to be invited to be here together with Joy, our talented UX designer, to share with you our little journey on this usability and inclusivity. So we came from this team from GovTech. We call ourselves Digital Design and Development Team. And just the name has suggested, we are the team in government that deal with the design and development of the various government products. And these are just some of the products that we have been working on. But without further ado, allow me to invite Joy to start the sharing of our little journey on inclusivity. Joy, please.
Hello. Okay. So today, you and I are going to share stories on how we design for inclusivity, or at least trying to be amidst a pandemic. And we are going to share 2 chapters on what we have learned. So in this first chapter, it is a story on how I grabbed onto an opportunity to do inclusivity. I hope it inspires people to just do it because it caused no harm to anyone and is good for everyone. And to begin, you probably already know what is inclusivity. You know it because we all know the feeling of being included in a conversation, in a party, or generally being included, feeling like you're part of something. So inclusivity to us, to our team, is about embracing a mindset to design for people with and without impairments. An easier way to think of inclusivity is to think of exclusion. Who are excluded from using your design or your products? It can be physical exclusion, conceptual exclusion, economic exclusion, cultural exclusion, or even social exclusion. And these categories, they are mutually they are not mutually, they are mutually exclusive. And before COVID, we have considered inclusivity features. But of course, to aim to include everyone and anybody is can only be a dream. In practical, this is how we treat inclusivity tickets in our backlog. So referencing the decision tree for inclusivity analysis from Ben Yon's book, this is a nice structured way to explain my team's decision-making process. It's good for a presentation avenue like this, but in actual, it's messier than this linear diagram suggests. His analysis model is based on the assumption that it is not realistic to include everybody. So when considering to make inclusion a must-have, which is mandatory, a should-have, strongly recommended, or a could-have, optional, we should first consider the stability of user characteristics, whether it is fixed or temporary. Then we look at whether the incident of occurrence is common or rare. And if the solution is going to be cheap, easy, or expensive, difficult. So I'll give you an example. For instance, we have elderly app users who are not so nimble with their fingers. This dexterity impairment may be long-term. It is rather common as well. And the solution for our context, we have decided to make the tap target bigger. This is cheap and easy for us to do. And this ticket is quickly added to the screen and we fix it. So inclusion here is mandatory. I'll give you another example. We have elderly user who is living alone. She is deaf and she is using our two-way communication panic button developed by GovTech. This user characteristic is going to be long-term. The incident of occurrence is rare and solution is rather expensive though. We have to manufacture a different hardware device that deviates from the current one. So inclusion here is considered as optional. But of course, we just can't leave this hanging. We make some changes to the responding model such that when she pressed the button, we will treat it as allergic cases and we will send somebody up to take a look. Now, before COVID, we also attempt to introduce translated copy multilingual feature. So English is working language in Singapore. Everyone by right should be able to speak English or read English. But the reality is not everyone is able to do so. So we really want to implement multi-language for all our products. So at the point of time, I started with one of our smaller scale project called Responder SG. It is a crowdsourcing mobile app. Our devs have spiked on the multilingual feature and all set up to go. So they asked me, Joy, where is the copy? We are ready. So I began looking around and I asked around in the government, how do we usually do translation? Turns out there are two ways to do it. Number one, commercial translator. Number two, look for my fellow MCI colleagues who can help with the translation. But commercial ones, I've been told the quality varies and my MCI colleagues are rather busy. They have a very long backlog. So I would have to wait a long time. And we have been pre-warned that the quality of a translation really matters. There have been several cases of translation blunder. Translation for language, Tamil language is especially tricky. So long story short, since the cost of doing translation is rather expensive and somewhat difficult, I have to give up. I put this ticket back into the backlog, even though this is a strongly recommended inclusion. And then COVID strikes. We have to come up with a website within 24 hours for the mass distribution exercise by the Singapore government. And we did it. By the next day after the launch, we are already looking at translating the content to add in the multilingual function. Because everyone in the team recognized that information is key to winning this COVID war. We want more people to be able to access the information. So how do we do it? We depend on our volunteers. So we got volunteers from the team itself. Our team is a 100-man strong team. They are bound to have people who are proficient in Mandarin, Malay, and Tamil. So you know how we have code review in software development? We brought that practice to do copy review too for translation. This is how we ensure quality. We even have debates on how face mask should be translated in Tamil. Group discussion make the quality better, even though we are just amateur translators. And by the third day, the translation feature is up and released. pandemic accelerated the process of inclusivity. Once the translation tool is up, we receive good feedback from sentiments. So sentiments is this floating sentimental smiley icon that you see here, which you see on most of the Singapore government website as well. Sentiment as a tool is pretty cool. With this tool, we are able to see what is most important to a citizen in real time. Based on 10K sentiment rating and 1.3K actionable feedback, we make another 40 deployments within a week to resolve some of this issue. And as you can see from there, the purple color box, you can see that before the multilingual feature is up, there are already complaints on the language. As time passed, we realized the need to set up in-house translation capability. We need to scale this up. So doing translation is taxing if we only depend on volunteers. Okay, it's taxing on our volunteers. Our volunteers they have their full-time job. They are either software engineers, they are quality engineers, they are designers. When we got them into volunteer, but it requires quick turnaround time. So we end up hiring our own translators. Translation is also taxing our developers because our product wasn't catered for localization at the start. So we have to improve the process where translated copy directly goes to code. And so we implemented a content management system for this. Now, ever since our in-house translation capability was built up, there are several products that have benefited. Support GoWare, Trace Together, Token GoWare, My Legacy, and the following any other products that we are going to launch. So at the end of it all, mindset trumps everything. Inclusivity, accessibility, universal design. You all have guidelines on the internet to find out how to do this. But it all begins with empathy. So inclusivity begins with design. And it is not just the designer task. Everyone in a Scrum team plays a role. And making everybody feel involved in this journey is the key to do inclusivity. Here you see our organization participating in Purple Parade last year. Purple Parade is this annual event that celebrates the ability of people with impairments. Everyone in this picture, developers, QAs, designer, PMs, even our CE is there. We are now part of this movement for inclusivity. And through this change in mindset, it is my hope that our team will now be determined to see it through to implement mandatory inclusion, no matter how hard, how expensive, how difficult it is to do universal design. Okay, now I'll round up my story with 4 tips on how to just do it for inclusivity. Number 1, be opportunistic and strategic when introducing inclusivity to your team. And don't get discouraged when the team isn't right. Seize the moment when you see one. Don't aim to be perfect. I try to do a proper way, the government way of doing translation. Right? I got intimidated when they say the translation has to be so and so. So aim to be good enough, but don't aim to be perfect. Number 3, measure and show result. After you do something, release an inclusivity feature, measure it and show it to people who can make decisions. Keep convincing them that it is worth it because it's going to be a long journey. There's so much to work on. And number 4, be sure to onboard the entire development team. It shouldn't be a designer task alone. Be inclusive about inclusivity itself. So this is my story about inclusivity. I will now pass the time back to Eyung.
Thank you so much, Joy. So I think Joy ended the sharing with a very important point about inclusivity is not just about the designer. And that also provided me a very good entry point. It is more than just a designer job. It is more than just a front-end problem. And this is especially so when things are happening at scale. So what you see here are just some of the need on the usability and inclusivity, especially during the COVID period. And because both Joy and I, we come from GovTech, so the thing we are looking at, we are also looking at how do we implement all these, address all these needs at scale. So if I may just put all of this need to summarize it under 4 points as well. During the COVID, a lot of such of this requirement, definitely one of the key consideration is about the speed of execution because things keep changing, right? Every day the COVID number up and down, and we have to address to the new situation on the ground. So first point is about speed. Second part is also about the accuracy of the data and information. How do I make sure that from the back end to front end, all the informations are accurate and consistent so that it would not introduce additional usability issue to the users? And thirdly, I think this is perhaps also our most important learning point. It is really about reusability. During the COVID situation, we can't just treat every of the digital implementation in silo, because that is going to take up too much of the cost to relearn and to remake the mistake and to go through all the learnings again. And last but not least, of course, at the national level, we need to implement things at scale. So this is just one, I personally thought, very good example to showcase what I meant by that. So I think a lot of people are kind of familiar with what go where is about, with what must go where, flu go where, support go where, so on and so forth, which is happening at the front end. But what most people doesn't know is that today, after having gone through this COVID situation for almost coming to a year or so, we have also evolved the whole go where into a tech stack by itself. So essentially what we are trying to say is that GoWare is not just a front-end implementation. There is a React GoWare, yes, it's more front-end. There is an identity GoWare, which is more the authentication bit. There is a poster GoWare, which is about how do we integrate with the PA officer to allow all this distribution ops information gap to be breached. There is also a benefit engine, which talks about how do we put all the benefit information at one place so that people doesn't have to go to many places to visit. So essentially, by having this as a tech stack, what we are saying is this. First, whenever I have a new requirement, new need, I can easily pick and choose. Okay, maybe not so easily, but at least I do not have to start from scratch. I'm able to pick and choose some of the reusable elements and to cut down some of the pain, to be able to put them together and to be able to fulfill the new needs. That's part one. And part two, perhaps what is more important, is that if you look at the bottom of the screen, when we implement each of these stack element, right, we are also progressively resolving some of the usability as well as the inclusivity issue. Things like the accessibility problem, things like browser compatibility, things like incomplete data, things like inconsistent presentation and stuff like that. But with the implementation as a tech stack, I'm able to solve once, and then whatever learning point, I'm able to scale it up to all the different touch points by itself. And this will able to effectively help me to address the COVID situation. Now, the other important mindset is also about the mindset shift of acceptability, because it is not just about whether my designer product or my product is able to provide that kind of inclusivity feature. A very tricky lesson learned is that if the operator on the ground refuse to take up your whatever design, and end of the day, no, you still can't exert the kind of impact that you wanted to have. So I gave three different examples. For example, on the left is really about, in this case, inclusivity might not be just directly interface with the citizen, but more about how do we help the government officer to work better and efficiently to allow to convert the mode of operation into something we call it a tele ops amid of the COVID situation, and allow us to help the vulnerable group better. At the middle is really about how can we really reframe the thinking of for the citizen to fulfill certain requirement from the ethnic group, but then we facilitate some of these, for example, ethnic keyboard out of the box from some of the digital service touch point, so that the inclusivity can be out of the box and at the same time cut down the operator workload. And last but not least is really about asking the operator, what are some of the information I need to bring out so easily accessible at your fingertips, so that you will help me to ensure that there is a consistency and accuracy of the data, so that at the front end, I don't have a usability problem when the data is inaccurate. So these are some of the important considerations that we went through during the COVID situation. Last but not least, it's really about how do we really effect this kind of usability and accessibility at scale at the national level. So these are some of the tools that we have built out for the whole of government. So essentially what we are trying to say is that we have automated this process of automated accessibility, uptime, usability, evaluation at the prefixed time interval. And at the same time, we try to prioritize for some of the high frequency touch point. So with that, we hope that accessibility and usability can be something that is out of the box for the government digital service offering. So I think to sum up the story here is really about how do we optimize UX and inclusivity for reusability and acceptability, not just only for the front end user, but for the operator as well, so that you can really exert the kind of impact you want to have. Thank you very much. That's a short sharing by Joy and myself. And if there's anything, feel free to reach out to us. We are happy to carry on with the discussion further. Thank you.
Thank you.
What a great talk, Eyung and Joy. Thank you. I really enjoyed seeing some of the tools that you've built in-house. And I love to hear those listening in live. Tell us, guys, what tools are you using to increase inclusion and accessibility in your products? What's a technique that you've used to increase inclusion that you think others should consider? Finally, I'm really excited to introduce an awesome Singapore-based founder of a pretty cool and inclusive startup. I am proud to introduce Xi Liu. She is the founder of a startup called Ferne Health, which we'll hear about in a minute, and it builds this private, convenient, accessible healthcare solutions for women consumers. Before starting her company, she lived in Silicon Valley for 5 years in the tech industry. She worked at a lot of cool companies over there, which she'll tell us more about, such as Adobe and Amazon. And one thing that's really cool with she is that she's a strong believer in equality and diversity. And when she lived in San Francisco, she was strongly encouraged by the cultural inclusion and diversity there and decided to bring that to some of the stigma against women's health concerns here in Asia. So I'm really excited to hear this talk with you because did you know that almost half the people in the world are female? It's true. And how we include females' user needs in our work is an exciting opportunity. So please ask all your questions for Xi that she can answer in the Q&A. Pop them into the chat. Thank you so much. Over to you, Xi.
Hi, UXers. Thanks for joining us this evening. My name is Xi from Ferne Health. Today, I will be talking about one of my favorite design topics, empathy and inclusion design. So first, a little bit about myself. I started my career as an interaction designer and worked in the Photoshop team for 2 years. Then I moved on to Alexa team, and there I did my transition from a product designer to a product manager. Now I'm based in Singapore. I manage my own healthcare startup. We are a women's healthcare startup that provides at-home screening and consultation solutions for sexual health. So if you look at all of the keywords that I took from our website, you might find a lot of interesting words about sexual health, women, sexuality. You might be thinking, oh, this person must be really progressive. But I wasn't always like this. In fact, a few years ago, I was exactly like this girl that we interviewed during user research. My mom always told me, oh, you don't need a gynecology test. You are so young, you're not married, so you don't have to be worried about anything. I never thought about going to a gynae visit until 4 years ago, a small incident happened that changed my mind. Back in 2016, about 4 years ago, I was actually in San Francisco, living by myself, and just started working not for too long. One night, I all of a sudden noticed that there were some really weird rashes behind my ear. It was super itchy. But I thought, oh, it might just be allergy, so I didn't pay too much attention. And just a few hours later, the rashes actually spread from my ear to the back of my neck. I went to the nearest pharmacy and got pretty much all of the allergy treatment that I could find. But things just got worse. About 2-3 days later, the rashes actually spreaded from my ear to my neck and to my chest and my back, and it was so itchy. It was the worst experience I've ever had. I was home and helpless, and the worst part was I literally learned that I didn't know how to book a doctor. I didn't know how to use my insurance. I didn't even know which kind of doctor I should be going for. Eventually, my friend actually helped me to find a doctor, and I got treated. And turned it out it wasn't allergy at all. It was a poison, either from oak or something that I accidentally ate. But that whole incident actually changed my perspective about my health. Because when I was home, just being alone, I realized nothing is more important than your own health. When you are actually physically sick, you can't really do too much. You can chase your dreams, you can think about romance, you just wanted to feel better. So I went to my first doctor visit right after that incident. And during that visit, he asked me a lot of questions about my health histories, what kind of vaccination you have taken, have you done a pap smear, have you done your annual exam? I literally knew nothing. I never heard about pap smear, and I didn't take a vaccination for HPV yet, and I didn't even realize STD is such a thing that you should be screening for as a sexually active adult. When I left my doctor's office, I just felt so ashamed. So I went back and talked to quite a few friends and just checking, was I the only one who didn't know anything? And what we learned was, when it comes to women, there are just so many things that are taboo that no one is talking about. And there are just not enough products or services that are available out there for us to learn about ourselves. Eventually, when I decided I'm gonna start a business, I actually decided to take this as a course, because just going through this whole experience and feeling helpless by knowing nothing about myself just triggered me too much. So now I run my healthcare startup. Even coming from a very product design and management standpoint, I personally find it was such an interesting journey for me to relearn this whole design experience. There are quite a few things we learned throughout this journey, and the first learning point was it sounds simple, but when in reality, it actually takes time for you to process that when your users are not talking about the thing, it really doesn't mean they do not need it. For example, a lot of women actually have concerns about their sexual health or reproductivity. 70% of women actually contracted yeast infection once. And 80% of women who are sexually active, they have got HPV positive at some point in their life. But when you go out and talk to your users, you will find not many women actually feel comfortable talking about this, and there's not a lot of platforms available for women to communicate. It's very easy for people to think this is a very small market, that no one have these needs, but this is definitely not true. Another taboo topic is actually birth control. Almost in every part of the world, birth control is a very controversial topic. And especially in a lot of places in Asia, because of our culture and religions, a lot of women face difficulties getting access to birth controls. But that really doesn't mean they do not need birth controls. It's actually the opposite. They need better help, but we don't hear their voice loud enough yet. The second learning point we found was how to avoid bias and really stand into your user's shoes. Coming from a design background, I often feel very confident about that I know my users, I understand their language, especially when I started designing for a product that for my own people, that I am part of the target user group. But sometimes people really have a different expectation. For example, most of my friends, when they start talking about sexual health, it's often when they are starting a new relationship back in San Francisco. But here, when we started getting new customers, I learned that a lot of people are coming to us because they are in a stable relationship and they want to be a more responsible and caring boyfriend or girlfriend. And that's why they care about their health. And another interesting thing is I got asked a lot of silly questions since I started working on my business. Sometimes it's coming from the opposite sex, like some males do not understand females' life a little too well. And then sometimes it's actually coming from our similar women around a similar age sometimes, just because we didn't get the same information, we probably didn't use the same product. So they also have a lot of questions. So trying to stand into your user's shoes and really understand everything from their perspective is a very important lesson. And we all know the importance of context. And here it is extremely important for us. For example, in Singapore, a lot of people actually live with their parents before getting married. Even for married couples, a lot of them actually choose to get a bigger place and to live with their parents so they can take better care of their older parents. But it actually matters a lot to our service because we deliver sexual health care products to people's doors. It meant privacy to us, but then when it comes to some people's life, for example, some young singles live with their parents, if it's a very conservative family, it actually means a little bit intrusive when we send a technician to their door to pick up the kids or to send a service. So we actually spend a lot of effort trying to redesign the package and to make sure it's discreet and our services are private enough to not cause any information leak. Another thing, of course, in different regions, the recommendations and regulations might be different. The expectation might be different too. For example, the recommended pap smear testing age in US and Singapore are actually quite different. And in a lot of regions in Asia, we do have way more religions than other parts of the world. And it's very uniform in Singapore, but still when we are trying to send out a message about our product, it is very important for us to keep it in mind that the message shouldn't offend anyone from any context, any culture. And another lesson that I have learned, it is very, very, very important to never forget the minority. This is a true quote that I took from a customer consultation, actually pretty recently. So one of our customers, she came to us because she went through a health screening program, and then the doctor actually asked her if she were sexually active. But because of the way she phrased the question, she actually indicated this is for the normal sexual intercourse, and the customer herself replied no, because she's gay and she never had sexual intercourse with a man before. So the doctor actually recommended her to not take a pap smear. And when she got home, she started Googling what is pap smear. And then she learned it is actually very necessary for her to take a pap smear because she's sexually active and she's above the recommended age. Just because a simple miscommunication, it can cause so much trouble for another person. This is definitely a good lesson for us to always keep in mind that asking the right questions without bias, without assumptions, to include everyone's scenario is so important. And then last but not least, which is also the biggest lesson that I have learned from my own journey, is to really understand the emotions behind the facts and the needs. This is a real story that coming from another user when we were doing the user interviews around testings. This interviewee is actually going through a real fertility program, and because she and her husband have been having trouble getting pregnant. They went to one of the best gynecologists based in Singapore, and after a fertility test, one of the doctors, he was very professional until when he started explaining the result, he turned to the patient and looked at her, told her, "Your eggs are not good." And because with all of the frustration of pregnancy and also some personal values being challenged, she felt so upset afterwards, and she decided she would never come back to the doctor again. I personally found the story very powerful because this is a good message for us to always keep in mind that simply designing a solution that can meet people's needs is just not enough. There is way much more that we could do by adding a little bit emotional component to it to support our users a little bit better can do so much more. Another example that's a little bit heavier is also coming from one of our real customers. She shared a story that when she went to a public clinic for a STD test, she actually got judged by the doctor because the doctor thought she got STD from unprotected sex and she's super young. But what the doctor didn't know was this customer actually got sexually assaulted, and that's how she contracted STD. It took her quite a long time to get over that part of the trauma and to decide she wanted to start a new life. And for that, she decided to do a health screening to make sure everything is okay, everything is normal. But she got another unfair treatment or another trauma again. So I think this is where us designers can really make a huge difference by not simply delivering a service that to fulfill what people is asking for, but to really add this emotional touch, to really emotionally support our customers, and to really share our empathies through our products and services. This leads to my summary of my learning. As a designer, when it comes to creating new product or service, creating new innovation, it is always so important for us to discover the unspoken needs beyond this surface and to understand every user's pain, even for those who we haven't thought about. And to deliver a service that comes with empathy and that really can warm our users to give them more support. And I definitely believe when we remove all of the stereotypes and the bias, we could truly understand our users. And that's when all of the users, all of the people who actually have needs but have more holdbacks, they will feel more comfortable to share their asks and to seek for help. That's the value my company is trying to achieve too. And as of now, we are dedicated to breaking the taboo of women's private health concerns and bring all of the accessible solutions to every woman's home. Thanks for listening to my story today. If you are interested in my business, Ferne Health, or want to learn more about women's health, welcome to our website.
Thank you so much, Xi. One of my favorite points about that talk you just gave is that there are often these taboos and cultural contexts that are embedded so deeply in our work. And it's so important to go beyond just ensuring a 50-50 gender split and to really think hard about who's not being included. In my own work, just to also share one area where we're thinking about this a lot at Google is around gender equity, particularly for users who are just coming online for the first time. And if this is a topic you're excited about, please check us out. There's a lot of cool research findings on there at nextbillionusers.google. Okay, now comes to my favorite part of the presentation. I'm going to invite the speakers to join the call now, and we're going to answer some of the questions we heard during the talk. The team is going to continue to pull out more questions for the speakers, so keep those questions and comments coming. Thanks, Deepthi. Sorry, everyone, for these technical troubles we're having. Whoever suggested this should be done in pantomime. Feedback for next time. We wanted to wrap up with just a few questions that have come through the chat and to get to hear from you guys about getting feedback from the team. So the question I have for you guys is talking to us about what tips do you have for creating more inclusive UX organizations?
Should I go again?
Yes, if you
Let
would
me
like
try that.
to, please.
The trial. Okay, so I think long story short, I was trying to share that I'm a strong believer of inclusivity is not just a design or technical implementation, but it is really a cultural movement. So it has to be both top down as well as bottom up, to make it truly successful. So in my mind, for example, in the Singapore government context, even at the beginning of the year, we should already have. In fact, that is exactly what we did. We have set up a strategic direction of what is the particular inclusivity kind of target or standard that we want to meet, so that the whole organization is aligned to provide that kind of digital service offering to the citizens. But on the other hand, it really cannot survive well if it's just based on the top-down kind of direction. Um, Based on like a certain criteria when we try to do the hiring, we also need to make sure that we bring in the right people with the right mindset, with inclusivity even built in as part of the personality. And because that is how we really can ground up organically, build all those inclusivity in all the service offering and product. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Eyung. A great answer going from both directions. And since you mentioned this before when we were having the technical demo, if you want to also add your thoughts, I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, for sure. I think I totally agree with you what Ian was just talking about. So I just have a little bit to end on, since this is like definitely a big thing for us when I was in a bigger design team. So I think there are often two aspects when we are trying to build up a team. And for one is the very obvious characteristics around people's gender, ethnicity, and the age, and the education, and the culture. And then there's also this softer part where we talk about people's perspectives and how everyone's experience was shaped. Because the most important part for inclusivity to me is to cover as many different angles or different demographics or different use cases as much as possible. So having people coming from a very different perspective can really help us to build a great team. Of course, by the end of the day, the cultural part, the team culture, like you have mentioned, it's gonna play a big role when you have so many different people coming in with different personalities. How do you actually encourage everyone to share their opinions without holdbacks? How do you actually to encourage everyone to collaborate? Coming from such a different background can be very different. So it also a big challenge for the team leader or the team builder to put together such a community to make everyone feel comfortable to share.
Love that point, Xi. And I also want to add, from my point of view, working in different organizations, I think it's important to talk about inclusion actively inside the team, not only making it like a culture, but making it something that we're like actively evangelizing, promoting. And maybe to your point, Eyung, that it's really vital that we're not just putting it on the table and leaving it there, keeping in mind the organization's often changing. So it's super crucial that we're actually talking about this problem a lot. So Joy, did you have something you wanted to share on it?
I think I totally agree with Eyung and Xi. So when we want to build a community that cares, you start off with a group of people, right? But you're not building from scratch. So don't think of it like you have to build from scratch if you are doing this and you really want to do this. Think of gathering people who has the same mindset as you. Right? That's what Xi mentioned, right? People who cares, they bond together, and then from there you build on from there and become a movement. And then people who also care, but they heard that this group of people are doing this stuff, they will join you, right? So therefore you create a movement. And then you start hiring people who also care. And then this is how you do ground up. Of course, it can be top down too, but you can't control what your boss say, right? So from our effort, we can only go ground up.
I like that point, Joy. And it also reminds me of a question that Charmaine asked earlier in the session. Can you guys talk to us a bit about, it's kind of a hard question, how do you suggest getting companies have buy-in for inclusive design when it doesn't get you straight to profits or might mean your colleagues have more work to do? So I'd love to hear your thoughts about how you've successfully in your organizations done that, and here or other places you've worked.
I think some products I worked on, like most of the companies that I worked for really care about inclusive design. I think a part of the reason was a lot of our users or customers of our product was very diverse, and that there's no control over, who's gonna be the targeted user of your product. For example, when I was working for Alexa, and one of my product was launched in 8 regions with 8 different languages at the same time, and so when things come to like a product like this, if you only have very similar designers, and if the team who's building it coming from a very exclusive culture side, it's actually very hard for us to understand what's going on in different regions. Like when we are advertising for the basics, the marketing message we send out in France, it's going to be so different in US versus in Japan. But then when we have a more diverse team, or when our office has more diverse people, you can actually include all of people's opinions and help you build a better service. So I think this is, of course, this is a very specific product issue where we do require a very inclusive environment or diverse environment for us to enable the product. But then I think it actually applies to most of the products we use nowadays, because the world is very connected, and you can just anticipate your product is going to be shipped to one single demographic, but then to a more broader audiences. So I think that can be where you could actually strongly use as like examples or like evidence to support your inclusive building.
So from my perspective is that you can't sell, if you have a leader that is looking for profit, and then you are selling a non-profit making idea to a leader who is looking for profit, you can't. You can't sell a pen to someone who is looking for a highlighter, right? So you have to convince this person that, hey, you are not just looking for profit, you're looking for something else as well. You're looking for maybe reputation. When we do this, the reputation goes like that. Or maybe you're looking to attract talent hiring. Good reputation will bring you more talent. So that's good for the company. So you can't just go with the angle of profit. You have to sell something else. Yeah.
Okay. Allow me to provide a more naughty answer. 2 points to add. So first of all, I think if I'm in that shoe, what I would do is that I'll try to find a very big example, big and good example, which is about a large organization. But then when you work with them, essentially they also have a quite high requirement in terms of the inclusivity design and implementation, right? In the Singapore context, it is not a choice, but it is a must that when you work with Singapore government, you need to have all these kind of WCAG, blah, 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 all this kind of requirement fulfilled. Then you use that to sell it a case that, do you want to really do business with this kind of big organization? And if you do, then that is, you better do the same, right? Second version of the naughty answer. It's really about, I also want to fundamentally challenge the mindset of like inclusivity is expensive, right? It doesn't mean all the time that in order to have a good inclusivity designed, or you really need to spend a very big bucks, right? Okay, I'm not saying this because this is a Google event, but Google Lighthouse is a very good starting point, right? So basically, there are a lot of community tool out there, which you just need a little bit of effort to persuade. Maybe you just buy a good coffee to your engineers to make them at least use the tool, and to run one round of accessibility check, so on and so forth. Then immediately, if you look at the recommendation to fix, in fact, a lot of them you'll be surprised. It doesn't take you a high cost or 10 sprint just to fix some of the very basic or fundamental or generic usability or inclusivity issue. So again, back to Joy point, just try it, right? You'll be surprised. Thank you.
Oh, those are great ideas. I love the point of like thinking that accessibility and inclusive design is always expensive, because I think you're right. There are so many great options these days to get like engaged and try it out for kind of on the cheap. Also, I think one angle on this is that it's not always about profit, because what you might be doing by designing inclusively is actually expanding your user base. So maybe you run checks for people with vision impairments, but like, I wear glasses, that's a kind of vision impairment. Many people have gradients of the inclusions, and sometimes things that might help one group of people, like wheelchair users, might also benefit a whole range of other people who just want increased mobility of these things. So I think thinking about that as like expanding your audience is a really great way to look at it. Okay, our second to last question, our penultimate question, is about reusability. Eric and Ayu had some really good points to ask about how reusability works for designing for inclusion. How have you guys been able to take some of the work you've done and use it other places? I know in some of your talks you talked a bit about this, but would love to hear these questions about like using the work you've done in other places to maximize its impact and increase its usability.
Okay, allow me to give maybe two concrete examples. Just imagine you have a CMS, the content management system, which is essentially a very common tech stack elements, right, or tech tool, right, in many of the organizations. So what is a CMS? CMS basically allows you to be able to set up once and use the same CMS engine, but then you're able to spin off multiple websites, right? And based on the same engine, when you spin off multiple websites and you're going to collect feedback, right? Then based on the feedback you collected, maybe some of you will tell you that, hey, you know, when based on this website, if you use this particular font size, basically I'm elderly, it is, you are not inclusive enough, I cannot read it properly, you know, so on and so forth, right? So based on that kind of feedback, I'm going to take that feedback and come and configure my CMS kind of configuration, so that not just for this instance of the website, but for all the future instance of the website, all the particular issue will be fixed, and in fact immediately fixed, because I'm controlling at the tech stack layer, right? So that is just one very basic example of what I meant by if you really need to do design at scale, then one option is you want to control at the tech stack layer. That's part one. Tech stack can also meant to refer those tech tool that is used for automated scanning, which means that in back to the same example, this is a CMS by itself. Of course, you can configure the CMS differently to really strengthen the inclusivity, but there could be another series of tech stack which allows you to run automated scanning, automated test, which is to scan what is the out of the box accessibility, right, in an automated manner, right, of this CMS product. So there is also another hell lot of opportunity that many big organizations are investing in that kind of automated scanning kind of tech stack itself. So hope I provide two different perspectives. Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Those are good examples. Do you ladies have anything to add about that or reusability? Otherwise, we can get to our last question. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think I just have like a small thing to add. To me, it's like, you know, when you are fishing and you catch a fish, or like you learn how to fish. So to me, like the reusable part is actually, you know, you always keep everything on top of your mind. Like if my design or my services were used by some, let's say people had visual impairing or hearing impairing, or you know, like, or coming from somewhere that has very limited resources, the part that, you know, the design I did might not be able to be reused, but then the learning experience, and next time when I am building a new service, this are gonna be on top of my mind. So I think that that's what we can gain the maximum from, you know, learning how to build an inclusive design, and because we will always trying to expand our vision towards every single design or like product, and then next time we can actually cover or like include more people or demographics.
Thanks, Xi. All right, let's move to our last topic. We've been talking for over an hour now. I'm really grateful for everyone's thoughts. I don't want to use too much of your time, but the last question I want to address, it kind of started out from Xi's talk, but I think we could all answer it in our own ways. So the question was, when users' needs are taboo, how did you conduct research to try to understand and provide the project that insights that it needed? Maybe Xi, if you want to get started on that one, we'd love to hear your
Yeah, this is my daily job, so I guess I'll just share a little bit more. It is a little bit more challenging when you are designing for a service or something that are more stigmatized or like only are used by some limited people. And so the research part is I think coming from like a design experience, what we can do is we trying to be inclusive as much as possible when we are conducting our research. So for example, the basics, how do you ask questions? When you ask people's gender, do you ask, are you female or male? Or are you ask, what do you identify yourself as? Or how accessible your research methods is, and when you are reaching out to people, is it only in person, is it by like a video call? For people who have trouble accessing those services, how do you provide alternatives? So there are definitely more basic techniques that we should be more mindful of. And then the most important part, I think, is how do you ask questions with your full empathy and with be very mindful of the you actually understand, basically showing your empathy that you do understand them in the way that they should be comfortable to share, and also give them options that if you don't feel comfortable to talk about, and you don't have to answer my questions. So it's definitely, compared to you are just like going out to have a random chat with other people, designing for more stigmatized topics is a little bit it just requires us to have more higher empathy and also inclusive mindset.
Oh, great tips, Xi. I don't know, Joy, I know you've worked a lot in this space at Eyung. Do you have any advice about how to conduct research when the user need might be hard for the user to talk about?
So the only closest topic that I researched on was a taboo topic. It was on music piracy. Does that count?
I'm interested to hear your tips.
So music piracy, so how do I conduct research to try to understand the topic, right? A lot of time, as long as I do it online, as long as they are anonymous, they usually will speak the truth as much as possible. Ensure it's not just confidentiality, it has to be anonymous. And because that is to protect the researcher as well. It has to be double blind. I don't know who they are. They don't know, I mean, they have to know who I am. But after that, I also have to ensure that their identifier are kept separately and then discarded. If not, if the law were to caught up to me, and then I'll have to provide the details of their identity, and then I'll be in trouble. It's not ethical that way. So this is more of the ethical issues.
Such a nice point, bringing in that even though sometimes it's possible with our data, it doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. I think especially in these issues, it feels very personal. And I think this question of like also getting at like giving people accountability, that like you're going to take their answers and do something about it. I feel like that's been helpful in my 15 so years as a researcher, as well as helping them understand that their feedback will help others in similar situations, that like sometimes people are willing to kind of put themselves out a little further if they know that it's a value for other people that they might identify like themselves. Those are all really great tips.
I have to echo that point actually, because I think a lot of topics are tabooed or stigmatized is because no one is talking about them. So once you actually share feedback and yes, take it into accountability, it'd be like we will improve it, and we will take your feedback and design a better service, and the more people actually feel more comfortable to share.
Great point. Okay, you guys, this has been an amazing chat. I want to say a huge thank you to everybody who's given the talk tonight. It's been amazing to get to hear from you and learn from you. To everybody who's dialed in and given amazing questions, a really big thank you. We know this is almost dinner time, and we want to make sure that this is a really valuable experience for you. If you have any last suggestions about what you want to learn about from other UX masters, please let us know, so it'll help us steer our plans for 2021. I also want to acknowledge this has been a year of inclusion, a lot of consciousness raising around the world about how we can be more involved and bring our whole selves to these problems. So I want to put out a challenge to all of us as a community to find those opportunities in our own work, whether you work in any part of the industries that our UX is serving. It's an important and challenging time, and maybe take even a minute after this talk to set a goal for yourself about how for 2021 you'd like to broaden the scope and make sure that more people have seats at the table. That's my closing thought for you guys. The last thing I want to say is a huge shout out to the Google team. You guys are amazing. Thank you for a wonderful year of UX evenings. This is not easy to put together, and we're really grateful. So we're really looking forward to seeing all of you next year in 2021. Hope everyone has a safe, happy new year and happy holidays. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you to the Google team.
Thank you.